Let's talk about running backs that you should start or sit in week 11 of the fantasy football season. Keep in mind, we've got four teams on bye: the Cardinals, Panthers, Giants, and Bucks. So you won't have crucial names like James Conner, Chuba Hubbard, Tyrone Tracy, Rashad White, Bucky Irving. But don't worry, we're going to go through all 14 matchups, 28 teams in play, and I'm going to help you set your lineups this week. I got you. Starting with Thursday night football. All right. Clearly, I like the Commanders. All right. And this is going to be a fun one to watch. NFC East is on the line. Commanders at Eagles. So it is in Philadelphia. And this is a huge game for the NFC East, right? Because if the Commanders win, they're the favorites. If the Eagles win, they're the favorites, obviously. If you look at the spread, it's very tight, 3.5 points. And it's also tied for the highest over-under of the week, just under 50 points. So remember, 1 week ago, we had the highest over-under of the week. That was the Ravens and the Bengals. And that was a pretty damn good game for fantasy football purposes. Could we see a similar outcome for Thursday night? I hope so. Two teams in the last 4 weeks who are not giving up fantasy points to the running back position. If you look at the points allowed in today's video, it will be over the last 4 weeks because we want to see what form these defenses are in. We don't want points allowed to be generalized, and looking at what defenses did in the first 3 weeks of the season, that doesn't really matter anymore. So again, we're looking at the last 4 weeks when we look at these matchups right now. And again, the Commanders and Eagles, two teams that have completely turned it around. Their rush defenses have gotten much, much better. Now, with as far as Saquon Barkley goes, of course you're going to start Saquon Barkley. There's not a single scenario where you sit him. I know he's coming off a bad game with just 8.8 PPR points, but he's clearly that dude for this offense. One of the best running backs in fantasy football. What we really need to talk about is the opposite side of the ball with Brian Robinson and Austin Eckler. So we had practice reports. They're kind of like hypothetical reports, right? But they came out saying Brian Robinson was limited in practice on Monday. So that is a good sign. You guys need to stay very close to the practice reports heading up until Thursday night. It's a good sign that he was already estimated to be limited, right? If you know how Thursday night football works. But if he plays, I'm definitely going to put him into my lineup. I think it's obvious if you watch Commanders games that they are really missing Brian Robinson. They're missing that big bruiser back who is a threat on the goal line. They really need him. And if he plays, is a must start. And that would mean Austin Eckler becomes someone I'm not very interested in playing. But in the scenario where Brian Robinson doesn't play, Austin Eckler becomes a must start for me. He's been so good filling in for Brian Robinson, averaging over 17 points per game in the last 2 weeks without Brian Robinson. So fun game, man. I'm excited for Thursday night. I hope you are too. But let's move on to the start of the 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time slate of games. We've got Packers at Bears, an NFC North divisional game. 41.5 points is the over-under, which is the second lowest over-under of the week. The Packers are favored by 6.5 points, so almost a full touchdown. A little note here, by the way, I love picking up the Packers defense for this week. Caleb Williams has been really bad. That entire Chicago offense is in complete disarray. So the Packers are a good pickup for defense. But Josh Jacobs, has had some really good games as of recently. In the past 3 games, he's averaging right around 17, 18 points per game, is dominating touches, has 3 touchdowns in his last 3 games. So we're definitely going to go ahead and put him out there and play him. As far as DeAndre Swift goes, another guy who pretty much dominates touches for his offense. The issue with DeAndre Swift lately is the offense has been so bad that there hasn't really been any scoring opportunities. If you look from weeks 4 all the way to weeks 8, he has a touchdown in every single game. And then if you look at the last 2 weeks, their offense has struggled so much, he has had 0 touchdowns. So you're kind of in a position where if the Chicago Bears offense doesn't turn it around, you might be stuck with the dead asset in DeAndre Swift, and I cannot advise it any more than I already have for the past couple weeks. Please sell DeAndre Swift. The schedule is about to get really tough for him. If you look at his next 5-6 games, including the playoffs, it is not matchups that you want to chase. But this week, you can play both Swift and Josh Jacobs. All right, the third matchup we'll look at here is the Jags at the Lions. This is tied for the second highest over-under of the week with 47.5 points. And the Lions are favored by 12.5 points. Guys, I have not seen a spread this big in the entire season. I haven't seen a 12.5 point spread this entire year. The Jags are huge underdogs. We don't know if Trevor Lawrence is going to play or not, but It looks like he might not even play again this year, so I wouldn't count on him this game. And as far as the Lions running backs, smash starts. You simply cannot sit a Lions running back. I don't care what format you're in. The Jags are one of the better matchups for fantasy running backs. In the past 4 weeks, they're giving up the 6th most points to the position, but it's been like this all year. I mean, it's not just a trend. This is just the Jags defense. They are just bleeding points to the running back position. But Jahmyr Gibbs, over 20 touches last week, and David Montgomery, 14 touches with the touchdown last week. Both of these guys got to be in your lineup. So the Jags running backs were on my bust list last week. They were names I did not want to play. And quite frankly, if you have to play one of them this week, it would be Travis Etienne. But you have to keep in mind, this is one of the worst matchups in fantasy football for your running backs. The Lions are one of the worst matchups in the past 4 weeks. They're one of the worst matchups this entire season. And they're getting Zadarius Smith into the lineup here soon as well, an edge rusher to replace, obviously, Aiden Hutchinson, who they lost. So Bigsby left the game with an ankle injury. I'm not sure if he plays this week. But even if Bigsby is out, I don't really feel good about Etienne. You're putting Etienne in your lineup if you literally have no other option. If you're just in a desperate situation and there's literally no other guy on the waiver wire, then that's the scenario where Etienne becomes a startable name. All right, the fourth matchup we'll look at here is the Raiders at the Dolphins. 45.5 point over under. The Dolphins are favored by almost a touchdown, almost 7 points. Madison is actually a pretty decent start this week. I know his last game was not very efficient, was not very effective, but he has been their workhorse, if you will. He has been their RB1. And if you look at the Dolphins, the last 4 weeks, they've been a pretty tough matchup, but overall this year, you have been able to score points in them with the running back position. So I definitely think Madison is in play as a spot start. I'd rather play Madison over a name like Travis Etienne, for example, because I just think that it's just a more favorable situation Madison is in. On the opposite side of the ball, of course, you're going to start Devon Achane, coming off a little bit of a down game, still touched the ball 17 times, including 5 targets. They're targeting him so much. It's so boring, but it's so great if you own Devon Achane. If you own Tyreek or Jalen Waddle, it's infuriating to see the amount of running back screens, but it's great if you own Devon Achane in PPR formats. And with Raheem Mostert, I prefer not to play him. He actually didn't even have a carry last week. He had 3 targets, which is where all of his fantasy points came from. But they're slowly but surely making Jalen Wright the backup running back. And I think we could see that continue to happen over the course of the season. All right, moving on to the Rams at the Patriots. 43.5 point over under. The Rams are favored by 5.5 points. Kyren Williams, of course, you're going to start him. He has got a little cold streak going on. 2 games in a row where he has no touchdowns. The first 7 games of the season, he had a touchdown or more in every single game. And the last 2 weeks, no touchdowns. I do think he will break that streak this week versus the Patriots, who are giving up the 5th most points to running backs in the last 4 weeks. He is due for a big game. I think it happens this week. And on the opposite side of the ball, Ramondre Stevenson, because of the amount of important running backs on bye, he does slip into that top 24 of my rankings. On a typical week, he'd more be RB 25 to 30. But because there are so many important running backs on bye this week, he is technically labeled a must start. But as we've been saying this entire season, Ramondre Stevenson is touchdown or bust. If he gets you a touchdown, he's going to have a fantastic day in fantasy football. He's averaging around 20 points per game when he scores a touchdown. But without a touchdown, he's averaging more around like 6 points. So he is completely touchdown or bust. It's not a good matchup. The Rams have been one of the most difficult matchups for running backs in the past 4 weeks. I mean, we just saw Devon Achane get shut down. But of course, based off of volume, you can put him into your lineup in a week where not many people have startable names. All right, the 6th matchup we'll look at here is Browns at Saints. 43.5 point over under. The Saints are favored by 2.5 points. Alvin Kamara, of course, you're going to start him. It's a terrible matchup, but the guy is literally drowning in volume. He's drowning in targets. He's definitely going to lead running backs in targets this year, coming off a game where he had 23 touches. The week before that, he had 38 touches. Is that a mistake? No, that's real. He had 38 touches the week before. I mean, the guy is just drowning in opportunities. You don't sit him in any week. I don't care how tough the matchup is. And on the opposite side of the ball, yeah, is that a surprise to see Nick Chubb as a must start? I think he is a very good play this week. I'm serious. I don't think the Saints is some superior team where the Browns are going to be out of this game early on. I think this will be a closely neutral game script type of performance from the Browns and the Saints. 2 teams that are, let's be honest, pretty bad. and two teams that have a quarterback that's going to make mistakes, but it's going to push the football down the field. So I definitely think Nick Chubb is a great start. In the past 4 weeks, the Saints are the second best matchup for your running backs. They also lost important pieces like Marshawn Lattimore to their defense, which makes it easier to move the ball against them. So I definitely think Nick Chubb is a playable name. This is a guy who in his debut had 11 rushing attempts, but since then up 16 to 15 rushing attempts, 18 total touches, 16 total touches in the last 2 games. I definitely like this matchup, and I definitely think you can play him. All right, the 7th matchup we'll look at here, an AFC North showdown. We've got Ravens, Steelers. This is a huge, huge game for whoever wins this division. 47.5 point over-under, which is actually tied for the second highest over-under of the week. The Ravens are favored by 3.5 points. Derrick Henry, my RB1 on the week. He's actually the 4th highest scorer in fantasy football. Currently the RB1 overall in fantasy football. I mean, there's not a scenario where you can't start this, where you shouldn't start this guy, even if you're in like a 2-team league. He's in your starting lineup, right? He has scored a touchdown in every single game. Now, on the opposite side of the ball, if you own Najee Harris, I have some bad news for you. Number one, this is not a good matchup. Over the last 4 weeks, the Ravens have been middle of the pack, but over the course of the season, they've been a very tough defense to run on. And also, more bad news, Jaylen Warren is starting to really develop an important role for this team. Last week, Jaylen Warren had 16 total touches, 45% of the snaps, while Najee Harris had 47% of the snaps and 21 rushing attempts. So if Najee Harris doesn't score a touchdown, he's probably going to have some pretty mediocre weeks upcoming, especially in a bad matchup here versus the Ravens. But considering how many people are on bye again this week, I do think you should start Najee Harris. For a lot of you, he's going to be your best option. But Jaylen Warren, don't sleep on him, man. This could easily be a Jaylen Warren game. If they are behind and they need a pass catcher, it will be Warren. I would not be surprised if this is the week where Jaylen Warren outscores Najee Harris. I'm not saying it will happen, but it would not faze me at all. All right, Vikings at Titans here. This is the lowest over-under of the week. That's mostly because of the Titans offense. It's not very good. It's tough to watch. At least Calvin Ridley's doing his thing, but everything else is a little bit difficult to watch. Under 40 total projected points, by the way, the only matchup under 40 projected points here. Vikings are favored by almost a full touchdown. We need to talk about Aaron Jones, okay? Now, Aaron Jones is considered day-to-day, and according to the coaching staff, Kevin O'Connell, they expect him to be ready for week 11. Here's what Kevin O'Connell said, basically feeling really good about having him for this week. If you look at Coach Speak Index, Kevin O'Connell has a 90% reliability rating when it comes to injury with Coach Speak. So we should have Aaron Jones out there. It's a good matchup. The Titans are a top 12 play in the last 4 weeks. But if Aaron Jones is not able to play, then you can start Cam Akers as a spot start. The reality is Cam Akers just is not a very good player at this point, but he will get a lot of opportunities on a really good offense. But of course, in an ideal world, Aaron Jones plays and you start him. On the opposite side of the ball, Tony Pollard, I'm still going to label a must start. It's a very tough defense, but in the last 4 weeks, the Vikings are giving up the 13th most points to the running back position. So I do think you can start Tony Pollard. Now, Tajay Spears, don't sleep on Tajay Spears having a little second half of the season revival, if you will, a little breakout, if you will. If you look at the Titans running back touches in week 10 when Tajay came back from his injury, because remember, Tajay's been dealing with a hamstring injury. This was his first week back. And in this first game back, Pollard had 13 touches to 10 touches for Tajay. The snap share went from 54% versus 46% for Tajay Spears. So don't be surprised if Tajay starts to take more and more work. But as of right now, I still think you can start Tony Pollard. All right, the 9th matchup we'll look at here is the Colts at the Jets. 43.5 point over under. The Jets are favored by 3.5 points. Man, what the hell is going on with New York Jets? It is really strange to watch. I feel like they find a way to lose games each and every week. But as far as Breece Hall, you're going to continue to start him. I will say there are some trends that are a little bit concerning. When you look at touches per game between this Breece Hall and Braylon Allen backfield, week 10 is the closest it's been so far, 14 touches to 8 for Braylon Allen. But if you still look over the course of the last 3 games, Breece is still averaging a healthy 17 touches per game compared to 8 for Braylon Allen. So we're still going to start Breece Hall. Such a talented player. Let's just hope that they continue to feed him. On the opposite side of the ball, Jonathan Taylor has been so good. He has genuinely been so good this year. If you look at his game logs, the guy is averaging so many rushing yards per game. The issue is the offense can't move the ball to save their life. Joe Flacco, what the hell is going on with Joe Flacco? He was such a good replacement for Anthony Richardson when Anthony Richardson was down with an injury, but now that they made the decision to just start Flacco outright over Anthony Richardson, it's like he's completely fallen apart. It's been extremely frustrating to watch. They say Flacco's going to be their starter again in week number 11. Let's hope that they just figure something out. I mean, every team is dominating the Jets. Let's hope that now it's the Colts' turn to do that because Jonathan Taylor's been playing good. It's a damn shame that this team can't get him on the goal line, can't give him in too many red zone opportunities, right? All right, moving on. Let's talk about Falcons at Broncos. This is the start of the 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time slate of games. And guys, there are only 3 games in the afternoon. I don't really like this. I have a personal qualm with this idea. I feel like there should be at least 4 games in the afternoon. Otherwise, it just gets really, really boring. But regardless, we've got Falcons at Broncos. Very tight spread for this one. Now, the Broncos are a top 7 matchup for your running backs in the past 4 weeks. Bijan Robinson is on an absolute tear. He is the RB1 from week 6 onwards. The guy is dominating touches, getting so many yards, so many targets, so many carries. The guy is just everything you drafted him to be and more, and that's great to see after a very scary start of the season. So Bijan Robinson doing his thing. We're going to continue to ride him. And on the opposite side of the ball, we saw a seismic shift in the Broncos backfield in week number 10. Now, if you don't know, Audric Estime had 14 carries for the running backs. There was only 17 total running back carries this week, guys. Audric Estime had 82% of the carries for the Denver Broncos. That is a very clear indication of what Sean Payton wants Audric Estime to be for this team. Audric Estime led the team in snaps, by the way, with 45%. You had Javonte Williams, guys, this week, 29% of the snaps. Javonte Williams with 3 total touches. Jaleel McLaughlin with 2 total touches. Audric Estime was the clear RB1 in this backfield, and I expect that trend to continue because recently we've heard from Sean Payton say, I thought he ran pretty well yesterday, speaking on Audric Estime, saying he'll continue to get more snaps. So if you're going to start anybody in this backfield, and I would not suggest to do so, okay? It's a decent matchup, but I would not suggest to do this. But if you had to start one of them, it would be Estime, a guy that I talked about picking up off the waiver wire. I've been really confused as to why there's so much hate for Audric Estime on the waiver wire. I can't think of a running back that's been more appealing in the past 4 weeks than Audric Estime off the waiver wire, but fair enough. I do think he is worth rostering to see what he can continue to do in his rookie season. All right, the 11th matchup we'll look at today is Seahawks at 49ers, another divisional matchup, and it's a 49.5 point over-under. This is tied for the highest over-under of the week with the Commanders on Thursday Night Football. It's a 7-point favorite for the 49ers here. Ken Walker, got to be in your lineups. You got to play him. Even in bad matchups, he's done really well. The last time Ken Walker faced the San Francisco 49ers, he had over 20 PPR points, including a touchdown and 8 catches. So he's kind of been, matchup proof so far. And on the opposite side of the ball, it's been great to see Christian McCaffrey back and healthy. Here's what Christian McCaffrey did in his debut. He had 13 carries, 7 targets, and 88% of the snaps. We were very bullish on starting CMC last week. We thought, hey, if they held him out this long, they're not going to limit him, and that's exactly what happened. Jordan Mason became completely irrelevant. He had 1 carry. Christian McCaffrey is a must-start, top 5 to 10 running back rest of season, and he should have even better fantasy performances coming up. It's a good matchup against the Seahawks, who give up the 8th most points to the position in the last 4 weeks. All right, huge game here. Chiefs at Bills, massive game. These two teams do not like each other. The Chiefs have sent the Bills home in the playoff so many times. The Bills are favored by 1.5 points. It's a high over-under. Now, here's the deal if you own Kareem Hunt. First off, what the hell happened last week? Kareem Hunt had 10 targets. He had 7 catches for 65 yards. So weird, and he looks like he has 0 explosion. It's crazy the way they're using him right now. But if you got him, of course you're going to start him. You can run on the Bills. We've seen that. You saw what Jonathan Taylor did last week, despite his entire team completely shitting themselves. Excuse me, family-friendly show. But you can absolutely start Kareem Hunt. What you need to know is Isaiah Pacheco is getting close to a return to practice. He injured that leg about 2 months ago. And if you have a chance to sell Kareem Hunt on the high, I would do that in a heartbeat. Now, On the opposite side of the ball, you're going to continue to start James Cook, each and every week. There's not a scenario in which you don't start James Cook, right? Each and every week. It's a bad matchup, but he's on such a good offense. All right, moving on to Sunday Night Football. We've got Bengals at Chargers, 45.5 point over under. The Chargers are favored by 1.5 points. If I had to bet on a team, I'd bet on the Bengals, but Vegas is betting on the Chargers here. Chase Brown has been the definition of a league winner since Zach Moss went down with that injury. Zach Moss and Chase Brown were kind of cock blocking each other. There's probably a better way to say that, but that's the reality, okay? But with no Zach Moss, Chase Brown has been unleashed. If you look at Chase Brown's averages without Zach Moss in the game the last 2 weeks, he's averaging 20 carries, 8 targets, 28 total touches, 125 plus all-purpose yards, and almost 25 PPR points per game. The guy has been everything you wanted and more. And it's a terrible matchup, but I see absolutely no reason to not play him each and every week, unless Khalil Herbert starts to develop a role here soon. On the opposite side of the ball, J.K. Dobbins, still the lion's share in this backfield. You're going to start him. Very few people are going to have a better option. He's the RB15 on the season so far, so we're definitely going to continue to fire him up into our lineups. And, to be fair to Gus Edwards, he is definitely someone who has a role. In very, 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 very deep formats, you can play him, but he's touchdown or bust at this point. Last game of the week, Monday Night Football, Texans at Cowboys. This should be an absolutely dominant performance by Joe Mixon. Joe Mixon should have his way with the Dallas Cowboys defense. It should not be pretty. It is probably going to be a blowout. Joe Mixon, I think, could have over 100 all-purpose yards. Probably gets into the end zone. This should be a dominant performance by him. And on the opposite side of the ball, by the way, Cowboys giving up the 4th most points to position in the last 4 weeks. On the opposite side of the ball, look, if you're in a desperate situation, you can throw Rico Dowdle out there. He's going to be the lion's share guy for the Cowboys. But this was my concern last week, and this is why I had him on my bust video last week, because the offense is awful without Dak Prescott. How much credit should we give Dak Prescott now looking at this offense, right? I mean, without Dak Prescott, they threw, I think under 50 passing yards or 60 passing yards total in the game. It was their lowest total passing yards in a game, the Cowboys, since the year 2001. So I just don't know how many sustained drives there will be. It's a terrible matchup for Rico Dowdle, by the way. The Texans are giving up the 3rd fewest points to position in the past 4 weeks. I don't want to start him, but if you have to, I get why you might feel like you have to. All right. That's it for today. I appreciate y'all watching the video. Do me a favor, hit that like button and show some love. Subscribe if you like the content. Last thing I'll say is if you have a tough start sit question this week, check out the pinned comment. You can ask us a question at any time on the Flock Fantasy website. And if you don't have an account yet on Flock Fantasy, sign up with the promo code LAND. You can get a bunch of things for free when you use our promo code, like the expert consensus rankings, the trade calculator, the team analyzer. I appreciate you guys. Just so you know, the wide receiver video will be out tomorrow, so be on the lookout for that tomorrow. That's it for today. I appreciate you, and we'll see you soon. All love. Now that those idiots are done talking, who needs some rankings?
Hell yeah, I need some rankings.
Then use promo code LAND, L-A-N-D, for 30% off any membership at flockfantasy.com.
Oh.